I'm going to call this public meeting to order. Just to let you know, please silence your phones or devices at this time. And with regards to our in-person and virtual delegations, for those that are here, you'll go up to the podium, state your name and address. There's a red button there, and you get 10 minutes. For those virtually, same thing. They'll state their name and address, and again, everybody gets their 10 minutes to speak. So this time, we'll adopt the agenda. If I could have Councilors Ackley and Begg who move the agenda. Are there any questions? All in favor? That's carried. We have one disclosure of interest at this time. Councillor Hoyle has declared a conflict on item 4.1, public meeting report for proposed draft plan of subdivision and zoning bylaw amendment for VL and 563 Kalali Street East, file numbers D12-02-23 and D14-06-23, 2023-196. Further disclosures? Thank you. So at this time we have item 4.1, the public meeting report for proposed draft plan of subdivision and zoning bylaw amendment for VL and 563 Kalali Street East, file numbers D12-02-23 and D14-06-23, 2023-196. Mr. Schultz, you want to take this one away?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to give a second for the presentation here. Okay, there we go. I'll just say next slide. The purpose of this meeting, pursuant to sections 34 and 51 of the Planning Act, is to consider a draft plan of subdivision and zoning bylaw amendment application submitted by the applicant Kimberly Harrison McMillan of Design Plan Services on behalf of the owner SG Real Estate Developments 3 LP for the lands known as part of lots 23 and 24, concession 1, geographic township of Humberstone, regional municipality of Niagara, now in the city of Port Colborne, municipally known as 563 Kalali Street East, and the vacant lands to the south. Notice of the public meeting was administered in accordance with sections 34 and 51 of the Planning Act as amended in Ontario Regulations 544/06 and 545/06. Notice of the public meeting was circulated on September 13th, 2023 to internal departments and required agencies, and notice was also circulated via regular mail to property owners within 120 meters on September 13th, 2023. Meeting details have been provided along with the council agenda on the city's website and under current applications. As of the date of this meeting, staff has received comments from the following commenting departments and agencies. From the city's drainage superintendent, the parcel is within the boundary of the Port Colborne at Wignall municipal drain and will require a drainage apportionment agreement. This will not be completed by the municipal staff, and it was recommended that the drainage engineer who has completed the Port Colborne and Wignall drain reports complete that apportionment agreement. The cost will be completely paid for by the developer requesting the reapportionment, and the contact information for the engineer can be provided at the request of the developer. From the DSBN, the District School Board of Niagara, has no concerns with the proposal at this time. Future students from the area would attend Dewitt Carter and Port Colborne High School. From the city's fire department, the fire department would like to confirm that Bell and Johnson Streets will continue into the development. From Enbridge, no objection to the proposed application. However, Enbridge reserves the right to amend or remove development conditions. We have also received comments from the following members of public: Rick McLean, Adrienne Favreau, and Roger Favreau. These comments have been provided to City Council and will be responded to in the future recommendation report. At this time, I'd like to present Planning Division Report 2023-196. Following that, I will pass the meeting to the applicant to provide a presentation, hear any comments or questions of clarification from council to the applicant or planning staff, open the meeting to the public for comments, and announce the requirements under the Planning Act for written notice of passage of the proposed draft plan of subdivision and zoning bylaw amendment. At this time, I'd like to present Planning Report 2023-196. Next slide, please. The lands surrounding the proposed development are predominantly zoned residential, with first density residential or R1 to the north, residential development or RD to the east and south, and second density residential R2 to the west. Next slide, please. The City of Port Colborne official plan designates the subject property as urban residential. Land uses in the urban residential designation include residential, neighborhood commercial, and community facilities and institutional uses. The official plan designation is not proposed to be changed as a result of this application. The majority of the subject lands are located within the city's designated greenfield area, meaning the development is required to meet a minimum density target of at least 50 people and jobs per hectare. The application will be evaluated against policies surrounding the designated greenfield areas, as well as the general policies of the urban residential designation when the recommendation report comes forward. Next slide, please. The City of Port Colborne zoning bylaw proposes to amend the zoning bylaw 6575/30/18 to rezone the subject lands from R1-CH, which is the first density residential with conversion holding zone, and RD, which is the residential development zone, to a site-specific R1, which is the fourth density residential zone, and R4-H, which is the fourth density residential with holding provision zone. Next slide, please. The site-specific R1 zone is being sought to permit block townhouses, street townhouses, semi-detached, and apartment buildings with reductions in lot areas and frontage, reductions in yard setbacks, and an increase in height. Additionally, one of the units is being proposed to permit a neighborhood commercial use. The R4-H zone is proposed to be subject to the completion of a Stage 4 archaeological assessment prior to the holding provision being removed. Next slide, please. The draft plan of subdivision proposes to divide the subject lands into 8 blocks for 108 block townhouses, 30 street townhouses, 10 semi-detached dwellings, and 138 stacked townhouse units. One block is proposed to be set aside for the archaeological area in accordance with the findings of the completed studies. The block and stacked townhouses are proposed to be under a condominium development, while street townhouses and semi-detached dwellings will be freehold lots fronting on public roads. At this time, Your Worship, I'd like to pass the floor to the applicant, David Eagleman, for a brief presentation.
Mr. Engelman?
Yes. Good evening, council, members of the public, and staff. Thank you for having me tonight, and I believe staff will control the presentation, so I will just speak and advise on when to move the slide. And I will try to not repeat too much of what staff had mentioned in their presentation. But so good evening, council, members of the public, and staff. My name is David Eagleman. I am a senior planner and project manager here at Design Plan Services. I am here on behalf of the property owner, Mr. John Chung, who is the registered owner of the subject property, and I will be presenting the application on behalf of my colleague Kimberly Harrison, who is a senior planner and project manager here at Design Plan Services as well, and is the applicant on this proposal. And she apologizes for not being able to attend the public meeting tonight. But I will note that Kimberly has been in contact with David Schultz, Mr. David Schultz at the city, and they have been discussing this project up until this point. So the proposal, as Mr. Schultz has mentioned, is for a draft plan of subdivision and a zoning bylaw amendment for the subject property, which is municipally known as 563 Kaleli Street East, as well as the vacant parcel as shown on the screen. So next slide, please. So just to provide some context in regards to the location of the subject property, it is located on the south side of Kaleli Street east of James Street, at the terminus of Christmas, Bell, and Johnson Streets, and north of Friendship Trail. A portion of the subject property is municipally known as 563 Kaleli Street East, and the vacant land is legally known as part of lots 23 and 24, concession 1. The total area of the subject property is 6.96 hectares. There are 2 frontages on Kaleli Street East. The eastern portion of the frontage is 39.62 meters, and the western portion of the frontage is 7.84 meters. The property has a depth of 408.68 meters, and currently the subject property at 563 Kaleli Street is occupied by a landscaping business. The proposed development will be an extension of the existing neighborhood from the west and will provide a connection to Friendship Trail. The northwest portion of the subject property, which has been identified on the draft plan of subdivision as Block 8, has been determined to have archaeological significance as per the Stage 1 and 2 archaeological assessment that was submitted, and a Stage 3 archaeological assessment is currently underway and is being worked on in conjunction with First Nations. Next slide, please. So Mr. Schultz has provided a general overview of the planning framework, so I won't go into too much detail on this point. But I will note that the proposal is in conformity with the city's official plan, and therefore an official plan amendment is not being requested. The applications that are the subject of this meeting today are to implement the vision of these lands as contemplated in the city's official plan. The subject property is currently zoned as residential development, RD, as well as first density residential, which further demonstrates the intention for these lands as residential development. Next slide, please. So the proposed development will consist of a total of 286 residential units comprising of condominium townhouses, freehold townhouses, semi-detached dwelling units, and stacked townhouse units ranging in heights from 1.5 to 2.5 stories. The proposed heights were intentional to integrate with the existing residential subdivision to the west that ranges in height from generally 1 to 2 stories. A residential unit permitting neighborhood commercial is proposed in the first unit of the first townhouse block adjacent to Kaleli Street East to provide flexibility and an opportunity for neighborhood commercial uses based on market demands and to address official plan policies that are applicable. As shown on the submitted and proposed draft plan of subdivision that is now on the screen, there are a total of 3 municipal streets proposed, which are Streets A, Johnson Street, and Bell Street, and 3 condominium roads in the proposed subdivision as well. The site has direct access from Kaleli Street East via a condominium road, which is to be located within Block 1. Both Johnson Street and Bell Street will be extended from the existing residential community to the west and will terminate temporarily in a cul-de-sac to allow for future connections to the east as requested by city staff. The condominium roads will provide vehicular circulation internally within the proposed condominium blocks, being blocks 1, 3, and 6. And a parkette is proposed adjacent to the archaeological area in Block 1, and there is a connection to the Friendship Trail from Johnston Street. Through discussions with the City of Port Colborne and city staff, the stormwater management and flood storage facilities will be located at the south end of the proposal on city-owned lands and have been integrated with the overall design of the proposal. An acoustical noise berm is also proposed along the south edge of the development in response to existing manufacturing uses to the south of the site. Next slide, please. So, as Mr. Schultz briefly discussed, the proposed draft zoning bylaw proposes to rezone the subject property from residential development, RD, and first density residential zone to a site-specific residential fourth density zone, as shown on the proposed draft bylaw, which is currently on the screen. The purpose of the proposed draft zoning bylaw is to implement standards that will ultimately permit development consistent with what is being proposed through this application and includes permissions for neighborhood commercial uses in, as I mentioned, in the first unit along Kaleli Street East. And it is important to note that an apartment building in the traditional sense is not being proposed here. In the city of Port Colborne, stacked townhouse units, which are being proposed in this application, are considered as an apartment building, hence the use of that term. However, in this case, apartment buildings do refer to the stacked townhouse units being proposed. There, in general, in terms of what the draft bylaw contemplates and is proposing, there are regulations which will be altered as compared to the normal residential fourth density zone provisions that are intended to accommodate the development. So again, in general terms, a height increase is being proposed from 11 meters to 12 meters to accommodate the proposed stacked townhouse units. Generous rear yard setbacks to the existing lots along Kaleli Street are being proposed. And minimum lot area per unit for stacked townhouses is being proposed to be reduced from 125 square meters to 85 square meters. Next slide, please. We understand that this development introduces new dwelling types, and I want to take a moment to discuss that in a little bit further detail. The 4 dwelling types which are being proposed within this application are stacked townhouses, which again are identified as apartment buildings. However, they are stacked townhouse units, street townhouses, block townhouses, and semi-detached dwellings. The picture on the left that you see on the screen now is an example of what a stacked townhouse unit would look like, and they are proposed within block 3 of the draft plan. Through consultation with planning staff, stacked townhouse units again are identified as apartment buildings within the bylaw, and therefore within the proposed draft bylaw they are referred to as apartment buildings. The number of parking spaces per unit proposed is 1 space. However, in addition to each the parking spaces proposed for each unit, there will be on-street parking along the proposed extensions of the public roads. The picture on the right that you see on the screen is an example of street townhouses, and street townhouses are proposed within blocks 2, 4, and 5 of the proposed draft plan. Block townhouses are proposed within block 1 and block 6. The only difference between street and block townhouses is that block townhouses will be accessed through condominium roads, whereas the street townhouses will be accessed through public roads, such as Bell Street and Johnson Street in this case. Semi-detached dwellings are proposed within block 7, and that was done intentionally to contribute to providing a gradual transition from the existing neighborhood to the west into the proposed development. And next slide, please. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions at this time, and the applicant's information is provided on the screen in case anyone would like to reach out to us. And again, I'm more than happy to answer any questions at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Engelman. Mr. Schultz, before I go to questions from council, anything to add?
Nothing to add at this time, Mr. Mayor. If there are any questions from council to the applicant or staff, now would be the time.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Councilor Baggy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, thanks for your presentation. You mentioned that on-street parking is on a proposed extension of public roads. Can I actually see on a map where you mean?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just to clarify the question, you're inquiring as to where the on-street parking is proposed specifically?
That's correct.
Okay, yeah, I'm not sure through you, Mr. Mayor, if am I able to share my screen?
Should be able
Perhaps
to.
I can.
No, you can, yeah.
Just one moment. I'm pulling it up here. Can everyone
Yep,
see
we've got
that?
Yeah, we've got that.
Great. So, and through you, Mr. Mayor and Council, forgive me. I'm presenting this application in Kimberly Harrison McMillan's absence. So I perhaps would like to take back some questions, and perhaps we can provide some answers at a later date. But to my understanding, the on-street parking will be provided along the municipal road extensions, which would be along here, where my if you can see my mouse, here as well, and here. So I believe perhaps the detail of where those specific parking spaces is not shown at this point, but it is my understanding that there will be on-street parking along the municipal streets.
Counselor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To you again. These streets, are these city streets or are they development streets?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so some streets within the proposed subdivision are municipal streets. You can see here they are labeled. So this here is a municipal road. This here is a municipal road. Here as well, this is a municipal road. But there are some private condominium streets that are proposed as well. And some examples of those are this street here coming off of Kaleli. That will be a private road, to my understanding. However, and as well here, these streets internal within this block will be private condominium roads, to my understanding, and then the remaining roads will be municipally owned roads.
Counselor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just thinking about for the winter time, we don't allow on-street parking on municipal roads, so for snow removal. So something you could take back to whoever. Next question, Mr. Mayor, if possible. My report says that you're in phase 1 of 2 environmental site assessments, but then tonight I hear you're in stage 3?
Mr. Engelman?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. My understanding is that a stage 3, it perhaps, I don't have the specific details, and again, I can take that back, but my understanding is that a stage 3 is either already underway or the consultant who has worked on the stage 1 and 2 is initiating the stage 3 and is consulting with First Nations on completing that stage 3. So I don't believe a stage 3 has been completed yet or is currently underway as we speak. However, my understanding is that it is moving forward in some capacity, and there is consultation with First Nations on that stage 3 archaeological assessment.
Counselor Bagan?
All right, thank you. Last question, Mr. Mayor. Did Design Plan Services have an open house with the residents before tonight's public meeting? Like just to get together, to go over the plans and show your neighbors what you're planning?
Mr. Engelman?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. I will have to take that back and confirm and provide council with the answer to that question. Let me just see briefly here. I'm not entirely sure if that is the case or not. Give me one second here. Perhaps I just received confirmation that there was no prior consultation with the neighbors. But again, I would like to take that back and just get definitive confirmation on that and provide an answer to council at a later date.
Councillor Baggett?
Thank you. I'm good, Mr. Mayor, at this time.
Great, thank you. Councillor Aquilina?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a few questions to whoever would like to answer. First question is in regards to construction of the subdivision. Where would the entrance of the trucks be coming from? Kalali or through Bell and Johnson?
Mr. Schultz?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I guess that kind of would determine on the phasing of the subdivision. So it really depends on where they would like to start. I don't know the phasing off the top of my head, but I think it was referenced on one of their plans. So I would imagine that if the phase one is, for example, closer to Kalali, then it would begin from that end.
Okay, so then I'm just, I guess, concerned about the impact that the trucks will have on the inner streets and how that will affect our roads.
Mr. Schultz?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, I agree. I think generally we can work with the developer to ensure that access is, I think it makes more sense from Kalali because it's an arterial road, it's
Right.
a busier street and can handle that truck traffic, so I think it makes sense.
Okay.
We can certainly work with the developer when that time comes to ensure that that's the case.
Okay.
Councillor?
Thank you. So my second question is in regards to the archaeological area. How do we know that there isn't anything outside of that area?
Mr. Schultz?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so the developer has retained an archaeologist to prepare the stage 1 and 2 archaeological assessments, which has been completed. The archaeological consultant has determined that the area that is being subject to further study is where they need to study further. The areas outside of that do not require any additional studies. So that was the archaeologist that made that determination.
Councillor?
Okay, so we're confident nothing beyond that area it has anything?
Mr.
Mr.
Schultz?
Mayor, we can certainly verify that in the reports.
Okay.
The region is our commenting agency that reviews archaeological assessments on the city's behalf, so we can definitely work with them to double check that.
Okay.
But generally, I would have full confidence in the archaeologists that completed that study, that, under their best professional judgment, that they've prepared that study in accordance with all provincial regulations.
Okay. So my last question is in regards to the environmental assessment. From what I'm understanding is, once any contamination is cleaned up, then there's that record of condition that has to be done. So in terms of timelines, when would that take place and how long does it take?
Mr. Schultz?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, typically when a record of site condition is filed with the ministry, sometimes there is a bit of a backlog, so it could take upwards of a year. Typically, we would see those handled through a draft plan condition where, they have their studies completed that, says what is required. And then through the draft plan condition process, they work on clearing those conditions. And then at the same time, they can work on other conditions while they wait for that to be handled.
So if it takes up to a year to get that confirmation from the ministry, then does that mean that nothing starts in terms of development with the subdivision?
Mr. Schultz?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. The development can't move forward until all the draft plan conditions are cleared. It does give the developer the assurance that, you know, they have draft approval, and if and when they clear these conditions, that they will have the go-ahead. So at the same time that they're waiting for that record of site condition to be filed, if there is one that's needed, they would be able to work on their detailed engineering design and other matters that are handled through the condition process.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Further questions? Councillor Bodnar?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to David. I want to talk about the flood storage facility and the dry storm water management pond facility. So I take it there's no storm sewers that will be running into this development? Am I correct, or will there be?
Mr. Schultz?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, those details haven't fully been finalized yet, but there would be storm sewers that are within the new part of the development, and then the storm pond would be, you know, their suitable outlet, essentially.
Okay, so that stormwater management pond will outlet into a storm sewer, hopefully.
Through you,
Schultz?
Mr. Mayor, that would be the process, yeah. The storm pond would retain the water on site so that it's outletting at the same, if not less rate than it is now.
Okay, so when's the last time, because this backs onto Ward 4 and it also involves a drain, when's the last time the sizing for those stormwater management ponds and that have been updated? And the only reason I say that is that the storms we get now are much more intense, involve a lot more water quicker. Has the size of those followed the weather patterns, or are we still using stuff from 10, 20 years ago? Do
Mr.
you know
Schultz?
that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd probably have to take that back to our drainage superintendent to see if she has any information on that. I will say generally the requirements that we have now and our standards that we're working with are a lot more stringent than they used to be to account for those more intense storms that we receive.
Okay, all right. I'll follow up further with the drainage superintendent. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Further questions? Okay. So David, I'm going to go to delegations. Certainly. Councillor Bruno.
My apologies for not being here earlier, but one of the things that was mentioned was this private condominium of some of the streets, and then there is the municipal streets. But I'm thinking those systems, unlike where Humberston Builders was, where it's a complete private development, or is going to commingle with our stuff. And so how does that wash out in terms of, are they using some of our trunk? Is some of ours going into theirs and then flowing back in? I mean, has that all been thought out? Because most private developments that I've seen have been an enclave onto themselves. They haven't been a plan of subdivision where some are condominium streets and some are city streets. So has Public Works commented on that aspect? Are you aware?
Mr. Schultz?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, they have been circulated on the application. We have yet to receive those comments. I will say generally, in layman's terms, I guess, the condominium portions are all private, so the city does not have responsibility over those services. As soon as it gets the municipal right-of-way, that's where the city's maintenance kicks in, I guess.
Right.
But in general, from what I've seen through the functional servicing report that's been prepared for this application to date, it all does commingle. It is a unique situation, certainly,
Yeah.
but it does all.
I'm just thinking
work
responsibility
together.
down at the end when
Yeah.
when one's plugged or our receptor lines receive their effluent or water, and then ours are up for expiry because they're old and these are new. Is there a contribution to our aged infrastructure that's going to turn, but yet there's use on it by them? And I know that you're not the engineering man here, but it does concern me, the depth of responsibility. I'm just trying to head off a problem before it happens.
Through Mr. Mayor, I think that's a great point. We can certainly take that back and work with that
Okay,
to
great.
ensure that that's taken care of.
Thank you,
David,
sir.
does this, based on what Councillor Bodnar was asking, would the whole new area actually drain right to the stormwater pond?
Yeah,
As opposed to going back to the old section of the town?
the entire land would drain to that new storm pond. Yeah.
So that would be all new infrastructure.
Right, if there's this, but I'm thinking, for example, like, let's say, for example, Johnson Street feeds their end. So our main expires, right, at X amount of date, but they can't get water without ours. Are they contributing to our replacement because it's doing more work, handling more water, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, good point. So you'll get that back from Public Works anyways, correct? Yeah. Further questions then? Okay. I'm going on to our delegations this evening. I have our first registered delegation is Lydia Favreau. Not here? Okay. Our next delegation is Rick McLean.
Thanks so much. Rick McLean, 525 Kalali Street East. Thanks for the opportunity to present some of my concerns. My very first concern is that, this process is abysmal. There's been no neighborliness with the company, and let me tell you how we found out. We get a letter, and I mean, for a lot of folks, this kind of stuff is Greek. We've got plans, a lot of legal talk in here and that kind of stuff. For most of us, it was the signs that were put up. And I'd like to be able to tell you that on Friday, August the 26th, the black truck pulled up in front of my house, and out of there come some workmen in plain clothes, and they put up a City of Port Colborne sign that stated that there was going to be all this development. Well, that's a little bit problematic. They informed me they worked for the developers. So I have, for everybody's knowledge, I've already submitted my questions to Mr. Schultz. I was told that I'd have to wait and I would have to come here to be able to talk about things, which again is problematic because there's ongoing conversation with the developer, with city staff, but we as the citizens and the taxpayers, suddenly this gets sprung upon us with no time to digest, no background. We don't get all these types of documents to be able to study. So you have to understand that a lot of us are up in arms about this. This is a very poor process to do that. So my first question, Mr. Mayor, and I know we can't answer all the questions here, but I'd like this on the record, is it standard practice for the City of Port Colborne to have developers erect city notifications, which is non-unionized workers, non-city employees? I think that's kind of problematic because the optics of this are obviously atrocious, especially after the Ford government was caught in bed with the Greenbelt developers, right? My second question is I would like to know, and when I say there's several of us that all live beside each other in that old area there, 525 moving on, 5-6 houses all in a row. We're working together on this. What's the exact date that the developers made their intentions known to the city? And before you disregard me for having any conspiracy theories, you can see that we've had an abysmal lack of information to go on. So we have a lot of questions. See, we'd like to corroborate the dates of contact with the developers, along with the notices that you, the city, sent out in our water bills, advising us that we should consider purchasing sewer line insurance. You see, if indeed you knew that there would be this amount of development in the area, with the old infrastructure that we have, all right, our 40, 50, and 60-year-old houses and sewers, then you know also legally you would be expected to correct any water main issues from the street to the connection of our pre-existing houses. There would also need to be an avenue to seek recompense for damage to our existing older homes as major development occurs both across the street and behind our properties. You see, the paving company that repaved St. Therese School, they were great. They came into our houses, they took pictures, you know, all that kind of stuff, so that if there was any problems with foundations, anything like that, they would end up paying, right? None of this has happened. And so you should know that if you're about to put 2,000 homes in across from us and 206 in behind, there will be damage, and failure to recompense, as my lawyer has told me, could result in a class action suit against the city and the developer. My next question, Your Mayor, is there's something, we call it the cut, but I believe here you call it the together right of way. Is that going to be turned into a road? If so, that's problematic. You're creating 8 corner lots. We purchased these houses purposefully for their rural feel and the privacy. We would think somebody would have to be recompensed for that. My fourth question, Mr. Mayor, is what is the risk mitigation plan for the increase in traffic? Increase of 2,000 homes and then 206 dwellings behind us. We've got a school across from us. And if you live on the street, you know that people are zipping down there. They're going from Gas Line all the way down to the Clarence Street Bridge. And like the cops only show up during school time. I've asked the police several times to put somebody there to slow people down. They're going 80, 100 kilometers an hour. What's the risk mitigation plan for all this increased traffic, the increased salt on those roads? Is that storm drain going to be able to filter out all the salt and the sediment? Is that going to go into the lake? Is that what our Nickel Beach is going to become? We have a lot of concerns about that. How did this land suddenly become suitable for development is my fifth question, Mr. Mayor. When I bought the property 8 years ago, I had to sign documents acknowledging that although Inco claimed to have cleaned things up, you know, it could kind of be like this. So, and the land across the road was tested and came back much worse than the south side of Kalali. So the pavers at St. Therese School, again, they weren't allowed to truck away stuff as they repaved. They had to make a berm, because you need special permits, as you guys all know, to be able to carry that contaminated land around, right? So are you trying to tell us that all the digging and dirt and dust and mud will not send nickel-contaminated particles into our houses? Are you willing to publicly state that none of us will get sick or cancer in the next 5 or 10 years from disturbing the soil? If so, show me the proof. We want to see the proof of that. Question number 6, Mr. Mayor. Has there been any consultation with the Ministry of Natural Resources, the Ministry of the Environment in regards to this? If so, why are these documents not available to the public before we come to a public meeting like this? Again, so we could study and we could be informed. This is a very, very poor process. Number 7, I hear mention that there's been contact with First Nations. Those are my ancestors that are back there, all right, in that archaeological land. I know for a fact that you guys are not speaking to the Traditional Council of 6 Nations. All right, there's 2 governments there. You have a duty to consult. You have to get our permission to dig back there, and that has not been forthcoming. As a matter of fact, the fellow that was speaking knows level 3 in the assessment hasn't started whatsoever. We were talking to them, the archaeologists back there for 2 years, and they all said, there's no way they could build back here. It's spread all over the place. There was our people there for a long period of time, and yet you want to make a tiny little area. What are you going to do with that area? If that was a graveyard of your people, what would happen? Right? It would need to be respected. It would need to be taken care of, but you have plans here to put a parkette beside it for I don't know what to happen. And finally, my 8th question, Mr. Mayor, is will there be changes to the operating hours of JTL integrated machine and the drop forge or other considerations with these companies? You see, when the drop forge happens, you don't just hear it, you feel it all the way to Kalali Street. Like I'm in my basement and you feel this, all right? Are you guys actually telling me, are these people telling me, are the studies that staff have done actually trying to tell us that that's suitable for a human habitation? Again, how is a land berm going to stop that stuff from happening? So again, lack of information. So in closing, I wish to reiterate the deep disrespect I feel from the so-called consultation with residents and taxpayers of the city. We deserve better. We deserve full disclosure and time to study the documents that you believe support the viability of this project, not a sign posted by developers who snicker as they walk away, "You can't fight City Hall." So I'm looking forward to some answers. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. Thank you, Mr. McLean. And I know that Mr. Schultz has all your questions that you've submitted.
Yep.
Thank you. Next is Melissa Bigford Lofquist.
Good evening, members, members of council. My name is Melissa Bigford. I am here speaking on behalf of my mother, Mary Bigford, who lives at 147 Colali Street East. So you guys have to stress, I did email my presentation. The proposed draft plan of subdivision zoning bylaw amendment D120223 and D140623 should not be approved. After reading through the reports, we have significant questions and concerns that need to be addressed on the impact these changes will have on the surrounding neighborhood. How are the current servicing requirements, water, sewer, storm sewer, of the surrounding neighborhood being protected? What is the current available capacity of the Johnson Street storm water pumping station? What exact portion of the capacity of the existing Johnson Street storm water pumping station will be used for this proposed development? What measures will be put in place to ensure only this portion of the Johnson Street stormwater pumping station is utilized? That is, if the required capacity is available. What is the current capacity of the Johnson Street sanitary sewer? Is there adequate capacity to allow for this development to use 29% of the sanitary sewer without affecting the surrounding neighborhood? Also, if this development alone requires 29% of the existing municipal sanitary system, how will the sanitary system accommodate the future elite group development to the north of another 2,000 homes? Are water main municipal easements something the city does and or permits? Who is liable for cost repairs of water main breaks over the easement? Why are city-owned taxpayer lands being used to accommodate this development? Why is the developer not putting the acoustic barrier berm, stormwater management, and flood facility on their property? Is the city taxpayers liable for the stormwater management and flood storage facility? What costs are associated with the construction of these facilities to the city? Who maintains these facilities? If the city maintains them, what are the costs to taxpayers to maintain this facility in the future? How will the stormwater facilities be assessed as it is located along the condominium section of the development, separated by an acoustic barrier and not accessible through public roads? With low groundwater levels on the property, the use of sump pumps is required in each basement. How will the sump pump discharge to splash and grade be captured? Flooding prevented if directed towards the rear of each lot. How will groundwater potential flooding be directed to the flood storage facility if an acoustic berm barrier aligns the facility? How will the different block and stacked townhouses rules under a condominium development on private roads interact those fronting onto public roads in the subdivision? How will maintenance be ensured on these roads? How will the movement of traffic be accommodated on only a 6-meter roadway? With part of the development being under condominium ownership, to what standard will the pavement of structure of these roads be? Will it be to the city standards or the condominiums? If the condominium ownership goes bankrupt, who is responsible for the maintenance of the roads, infrastructure, and properties? Is it the city and ultimately taxpayers who become liable? Another major concern is the realignment of the flood line. When will developers and consultants realize you can't just realign floodlines? Is the Park Paquette large enough to suit the proposed size of the development? What is the proposed height of the stacked townhouses? How is it determined that the large future residential development to the north should not be included in the traffic study? This potential development and the current development before council will have significant impacts of traffic along Colali Street and the surrounding neighborhood, and should not just be considered background traffic in the 2008 Future Horizon year in the traffic study. What measures will be put in place to ensure the proper removal and disposal of the contaminated soil, including measures to protect the abutting neighbors, specifically to dust and air pollution? Why does the city have a set of established bylaws that are put in place to protect abutting landowners if they can be amended or reduced at will to suit developers? Why the different set of rules? The city has experienced many major storm events over the past couple of years, and this development will significantly increase demand on the storm and sanitary sewer system. Many of the surrounding neighborhood insurance policies have changed the designation as being on a floodplain and have had reductions in coverage due to these changes. At least 14 homes on Janet Street were flooded in a major storm event from backup of the city storm and sanitary sewers, and no explanation of cause was provided. How do we prevent this from happening to the abutting properties of this development, considering the aged infrastructure that will be accessed and used by this development? In conclusion, the zoning bylaw amendments, special provisions, and reductions in minimum setbacks should not be approved. There are numerous outstanding issues, concerns, and questions regarding the development of this property as mentioned above. The sheer size and nature of this development, with all the reductions in lot areas and frontage, reduction in yard setbacks, and an increase in height required to make it fit on the property, do not work and are not in the best interest of the city and the surrounding neighborhood. Thank you.
Questions, council? Guys, no more clapping, please. That's not part of this public meeting. Thank you. No cheering or booing or on both sides of going here. Councillor, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to, Melissa, you mentioned you sent this
Email? Well, I only finished it. It didn't come?
I don't have a record of you sending an email. It's not the addendum package.
Oh, no, I didn't send it then. I didn't get it in by noon. So I sent it to the emails tonight.
The city council emails?
Yeah.
Okay.
I sent it now to be included in the minutes, but with working, I don't always get these done by noon with all the pages I have to read and report, so.
I know the feeling. No problem. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, councillor. Further questions? Thanks, Melissa.
Okay.
We have, next is on virtual is Roger Favreau. Is Roger here? Yeah, okay. Roger, welcome.
You hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Hi, Mr. Mayor. Bill, how you doing?
Good, good. You can go ahead.
Good. Thank you. A couple questions. Actually, about 4 of them. A couple things that I'd like to know. I don't understand what the definition of a private condominium road is, so I'd like to get clarity around that. I'd like to get a copy of what was presented tonight. It's the first time I've seen that much detail. Like others have said, I've got a one-pager that's pretty cumbersome, that's very hard for somebody like me to read. Next question is, I'm wondering why we are proposing such a high density versus low density traffic area. The entire area there is all single dwelling homes. Why is there not one dwelling home being proposed in this division? And lastly, I'd like to get if possible, some of the names and other folks that have presented and talked to tonight. I can't see, there's no cameras, I guess, so I can't see what's going on there, but I wouldn't mind being able to talk to some other folks around, things that they're going through as well. My mom lives at 557 Cloudy Street East, so the private condominium road that's being talked about is going to be obviously right next to her house. And it would be good to collaborate with some of the folks around what they're seeing as well.
Good.
Thank you.
Yeah, just state your address, Raj.
So it's 557 Cloudy Street East.
Okay, great, thank you. Mr. Schultz can gather that information. Yeah. So staff will take that, Roger, and they will provide it, and they can provide answers. All right.
Thank you. Yep.
Anything further?
No, that's it. Thanks.
Okay. Questions? No. Thank you. Great. Thanks again, Raj. So now I go to the gallery for those that want to speak that haven't registered. Just step up to the podium, press the red button, state your name and address, please.
My name is Brian.
Oh, press the button. Yeah, that's okay.
My name is Brian Rose. I reside at 508 Bell Street. I'm the second last house on the left side prior to this proposal. As my fellow neighbor stated, many of the residents in that area are extremely upset with this proposal. I purchased my home on October the 24th, 2014. One of the main reasons I moved to Port Colborne from Chicago is the fact that this reminded my hometown, Thunder Bay, back in those days, Fort William and Port Arthur. And I found that this street, Bell Street, it was quiet, many senior citizens, very few children, and it was a completely quiet area until I moved in, and then I found out about the forge after a week later. But beside that, I am concerned when I have a rain in my area at 508 Bell Street, my sump pump is on continuously. With this proposal, I'm really concerned with the additional housing, the sewage, the water waste, and of course our human waste. Where's this all going to go? The infrastructure, my home is from 1960. How are they going to make up these new homes with old piping? A major, major problem. It's going to be problematic. And also, 2 years ago, the archaeological dig, right? And they were digging and they found Indian artifacts on that property. I was there and I spoke with them. And they assured me that this land was going to be preserved in the inheritance of the Indian and Aboriginal people. With this subdivision, it's going to go by the wayside. And you can be rest assured that when this is going to be gone through, there's going to be additional housings going in that little specific area, which is going to do nothing for the Aboriginal people. Also residing in this area over the last several years I've been there, I've seen 25 deers in that area. I've seen wild turkeys in that area, and I even seen the odd coyote. It's their habitat, and all of a sudden we're going to wash them away, we're going to push them out of that area, right? And we're going to say, find some other place to live. We don't care about you. There is no, with these additional families coming to this great city, and I love Port Colborne, and I enjoy living here. But we do not have the extra facility for hospitals. With this extra noise going down these 3 streets from Bell, Christmas, and the other street, Johnson Street, it is going to be a major dilemma for us people who are senior citizens like myself. I'm 77 years of age. I moved there because of the situation and how quiet it is in that area. It's all going to change if you allow this to go through. And if you do, you should be ashamed of yourself. The people who moved in this area, moved in those areas, and they reside in those areas because they love that specific part of the town. I didn't move on the west side of the city. I moved on the east side of the city because it was quiet. And you're right. All of a sudden, they stick up a sign at the end of my street, 2 houses from my home, right? And here we are. We're going to build these damn townhouses. And as this gentleman has said, they're stacked townhouses. They're going to be they're apartment buildings. And he comes up with the amount of 400 and some people. When you get stacked housing, you're going to get additional people in there. Have no illusion, because you're going to have more than one family residing there. And if I'm wrong, feel free to correct me. I am very concerned about this development. I've spoken to many of my neighbors going down the street. What do you think of this development? Do you think it's a good idea for us? Is it going to actually devaluate our homes? Is it going to be geared to income? I saved all my life for that house that I reside in. And all of a sudden now they want to build these townhouses. I didn't move in that area because there were townhouses. I moved in that area because there was homes, single development homes, that I can enjoy the rest of my life. And now you want to take that away from me. I do not appreciate that. I'm a retired vet, and I put my life on the line for this country, and I do not like the fact that someone comes at the end of my block and stick up a damn sign and says, we're going to do this to this area. It's unconscionable. And I'm ashamed that we're allowing this in this city. That's all I have to say. I thank you kindly for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. Questions to the speaker? Seeing none. Thank you.
And I thank you.
Any further comments? Great, thanks. Any further clarification or questions to staff? Counselor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, apologies for arriving late, but since I've arrived, the last questions by Councillor answered by the consultant was, he's not the lead on this and he'll come back with the answers. And so I'm concerned about two things. Not sure if what I missed was similar verbiage, but at what point does a public meeting not become a public meeting if we're not getting answers? But again, I wasn't there for that. What I am concerned about is that he did say he would get back to the planning department. So for the edification of the audience, if those answers that the consultant was going to come back with go to you, do they get out to people before the next public meeting? Because if they want to digest those answers, and God knows I haven't had to ask this question before, but a lot of the answers were given on the night of the public meeting. And so I'm concerned that a lot of the stuff that he's going to get back to you on is only going to go to you and will be incorporated in your report when these folks come back and get their next notice. But how can they view any of those comebacks in the interim?
Mr. Schultz.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, you are correct. That's typically the case. Or if we receive correspondence materials, they're included in the staff report when that comes forward. In this case, if council desires, we could, once we do receive those, we could have those posted on the website and accessible to the public if that's the desire of council. We can also notify the residents that have spoken tonight to have those materials distributed.
Councillor?
Yes, I would like to hear that. I don't know if you need a motion from us, I think, but more information is always better.
Yeah, so we can take that as staff direction. Yeah, is that fine, Councillor? Yeah. Okay.
If I may, just Mayor, to any interested members of the public that are here, there is a sign-in sheet at the back of the room. If you'd like to receive any future notices or materials regarding this application, please sign your name and provide your email and address, and we'll be sure to notify you.
Great, thank you. Further questions or clarification? So there is staff, or council direction to staff with regards to the posting and getting back to those that submitted their questions, because some people did. Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, a little late again with Councilor Bruno. Can we be assured somebody's going to be here in person from the developer in the next meeting instead of just doing the Zoom? Like, what we need is a person that can answer it right away, that is mostly familiar with this project. And for council also, I asked a lot of questions and I didn't get a straight answer on most of them, Mr. Mayor. So I would appreciate somebody from the design plan services show up when it comes back to council, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Mr. Schultz?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we could certainly request that. Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. Further questions? Okay, so we do have one recommendation, that Development and Legislative Services Planning Division Report 2023-196 be received for information. If I could have Councilors Elliott and Bodner move that. Seeing no further questions, comments, all in favor, that's carried to receive. And thank those that came for that item tonight. Item 4.2 4.2, Councillor Hoyle's coming back. Yeah, you don't have to stick around for the next one, guys. For that one, you can leave if you want. For 4.1, you don't have to stick around for 4.2. Yeah, you can leave. Yeah, the back. Yeah, you can sign it at the back.
There's two there, and the address is on top of both of them.
Oh, somebody take- Okay, we're going to move ahead with item 4.2. It's a public meeting report for proposed zoning bylaw amendment D14-07-23 and official plan amendment D09-04-23, 650 Main Street West. Mr. Room.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just give our deputy clerk some time. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this meeting, pursuant to sections 22 and 34 of the Planning Act, is to consider an application submitted by NPG Planning Solutions on behalf of the owner, Priscilla Facey, for the lands known as part of Lot 2, Concession 2, formerly in the Township of Humberstone, now in the City of Port Colborne, Regional Municipality of Niagara, municipally known as 650 Main Street West. The applications propose to amend the official plan and zoning bylaw to permit a 6-story mixed-use building consisting of residential and commercial space. Notice of the public meeting was administered in accordance with Section 22 and 34 of the Planning Act as amended and Ontario Regulations 543/06 and 545/06. The notice of public meeting was circulated to the required agencies and property owners within 120 meters of the lands on or before September 13th, 2023. Meeting details have been provided along with the council agenda on the city's website and under current applications. As of the date of this meeting, no written correspondence has been received from the public. Additionally, correspondence has been received from the city's drainage superintendent, fire department, DSPN, Enbridge, and the region. The drainage superintendent, DSPN, and Enbridge all have no objections. The fire department has indicated that the fire hydrant location to the north side of Main Street will not be accepted, and the region has indicated that the entrance off of Main Street West is not suitable and will need to be adjusted before support can be given. The full regional comments have been included in the addendum package to council. The procedure to be followed this evening will be to present Development and Legislative Services Department Planning Division Report 2023-198, followed by a presentation from NPG Planning Solutions. We will receive questions of clarification from council, open the meeting to the public for comments, and announce the requirements under the Planning Act for a written notice of adoption and passage of the proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendment. At this time, I'd like to present Planning Division Report 2023-198. Next slide. The subject lands are located southeast, on the southeast side of Main Street West. The lands surrounding the subject property are primarily zoned as first density residential to the east and highway commercial to the north, south, and west. The uses surrounding the subject property consist of dwellings to the east and commercial uses to the north, south, and west. Next slide. The City of Port Colborne official plan currently designates the property as highway commercial. Land uses in this designation include hotels, motels, automobile sales and service establishments, places of amusement and recreation, drive-through/takeout restaurants, and accessory uses there too. Next slide, please. The official plan amendment proposes to redesignate the lands from highway commercial to a highway commercial special policy area. The amendment seeks to permit a combination of ground floor commercial and residential, as well as upper floor residential units, where residential units are not permitted in the highway commercial designation. Section 3.8 of the official plan will be used to assess this application when a recommendation returns back to council. Next slide, please. The subject parcel is currently zoned as highway commercial, and the highway commercial zone currently does not permit residential uses. The zoning bylaw amendment proposes to change the zoning from the highway commercial zone to a site-specific mixed-use zone to accommodate a mixed-use building, including commercial and residential spaces. The following site-specific amendments to the mixed-use zone are proposed. Go to the next slide, please. They will be proposing a minimum front yard setback 4.15 meters where 9 is required, rear yard setback of 3 where 4.5 meters is required, a side yard setback of 5 where 10 meters is required, a height of 20 meters where 11 is the maximum permitted height, required parking spaces to 132 spaces where 136 is required. A standard parking space dimension of just the standard space obstructed on one side, the dimensions being changed from 2.6 meters in width where 3 meters is required. Landscape buffer from 3 meters where 4 meters is required, a driveway width of 6 meters where 7.5 is required, and a loading space be permitted in the rear yard, and then a minimum landscaped open space of 0% where 10% is required where parking areas permit over 100 spaces. At this time, I would like to pass the floor to the applicant, who will provide a brief presentation.
Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
Just state your names when each of you speak. Thanks.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, my name's Max Fedishak, and I'm a planner with MPG Planning Solutions. I'll be making a brief presentation in support of the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment application at 650 Main Street West. I'm joined by Jesse Ospitz, senior planner at MPG Planning Solutions, and also our clients, Priscilla and Stimmett. Brief introduction to our client. Stimmett has lived in Port Colborne with his family since 2008. I believe he acquired the property in 2008 as well. And Priscilla is partnering with him on the application. Sorry, I can't see the screen. Oh, I'll just look that way. Next slide, please. I'll try and fly through a few of these statistics since Chris presented them already. So subject lands are on Main Street West, have a depth of approximately 82 meters and frontage of 110 meters with 5,300 square meters of area. Next slide, please. So the proposed development consists of a 6-story mixed-use structure located in the northeastern corner of the site. The development will feature 95 dwelling units. 326 square meters of ground floor commercial area is also proposed. 132 parking spaces are proposed via a mix of surface and a parking structure. And there will also be 4 electric vehicle charging stations, allowing for 8 electric vehicles to be charged at once. Next slide, please. The slide shows renderings of the proposed development. Next slide, please. So as Chris said, the official plan amendment is proposed to change redesignate the lands from highway commercial to a special policy highway commercial area to permit ground floor and upper floor residential uses in the highway commercial designation. Next slide, please. Once again, I won't spend too much time on this slide. These are the zoning bylaw amendments, site-specific amendments being requested for the zone. Next slide, please. I want to take a quick second to speak about the need for housing within Ontario and Port Colborne. So as existing, over 70% of housing in Port Colborne is single detached dwellings. So in June of this year, Council adopted a strategic plan to guide the municipality's decision until 2026. The strategic plan states that our goal is to support the development of affordable housing. Provincial calls for more housing density and to end exclusionary municipal rules that block or delay new housing require us to ensure our decision-making approach on land use planning, growth, and development is coordinated, creative, and centered on the current and future needs of our community. In September 2022, the city adopted an affordable housing strategy. One of 4 primary goals contained in the strategy is to increase the diversity of built forms to provide more housing options for residents within the city. Housing supply is not keeping up with housing demands, and the applications proposed serve to increase housing supply and diversity within the city. Next slide, please. Provincial and regional policy also requires planning authorities to provide for a range and mix of housing types. Policy 1.4.3 of the PPS states planning authorities shall provide for an appropriate range and mix of housing options to meet housing needs of current and future residents. Similarly, Policy 2.2.1.1 of the Niagara official plan states development in urban areas will support a diverse range and mix of housing types, unit sizes to accommodate current and future market-based and affordable housing needs. Next slide. Thank you. Once again, similarly, the city's official plan includes policies also directing the municipality to provide a mix of land uses, compatible, compact building design, and a range of housing opportunities. Land use compatibility has been greatly considered during the design of the proposed development. The building is located at the northeastern corner of the property, set back 16 meters from the residential uses to the east. The residential dwellings to the east are set back approximately 30 meters from the shared property line, providing approximately 46 meters of setback between the buildings, mitigating any shadowing concerns. Further, a 2.6 meter high board-on-board fence along the eastern property line will serve to assist screening the development from these residential uses. The subject lands also front on a regional road, which is the preferred and ideal location for higher density development due to traffic and pedestrian capacity. Finally, a 3-meter wide landscape buffer strip is provided around the perimeter of the development to further assist with mitigation. So in conclusion, we believe the proposed development is supportable as it's consistent with the provincial policy statement, conforms to the growth plan, region, and city's official plans, facilitates compact residential intensification within the built-up area where growth is directed, contributes to the diversification of housing options in the city, and is compatible with surrounding land uses. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, gentlemen. Council, questions to either staff or the speakers? Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. I don't know if this can be answered by the agent consultant or it has to go back to the owner. So with respect to this development, is the person in the room here, is the owner of the property, are they also the developer builder, or are they seeking approvals to then potentially sell to a developer builder?
Gentlemen?
Are you comfortable with approaching? Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Our client will provide the answer to that.
Great, thank you very much.
Just again, state your name, thanks.
Hello, my name is Priscilla Facey, and I am happy to answer the question through the mayor. So no, we are the developer and builder, although we will contract a construction management firm to build it. There is no intention to actually sell this property, no.
Okay. If I could.
Councillor?
Thank you. Do you have, is this your first build, or do you have a repertoire of buildings that we built? We've had other developers come to town. As Councillor Baggy said, one of the best things that I've seen happen, and many of us seen happen, is that meeting ahead of time. You're not required to do it. You've elected to do the public process here, which is required, as you know, under the Planning Act. But do you have, I'm trying to lost for the word, a repertoire, a CV of properties that you've built before?
Yes, so yes, through the mayor, I have completed with a partner a 54-unit stacked townhome development in Niagara Falls. I've also got a second project currently under construction in Niagara Falls on McLeod Road. And that is a 27-unit stacked townhome development that, again, I have hired a construction management firm that's doing the build. So I am familiar, and I do have a repertoire.
Would you be able to send us any of that?
Yeah,
just so we
absolutely.
can
And MPGs, they've worked on it as well, so yes.
have a look at that. Thank you.
So just before you go there.
Yes.
Yeah, if you can get that to your consultants and then send it through to Chris, and then Chris can share it with council.
Certainly.
Great, thank you. Yep, go ahead.
One other for now. So based on, you've elected to go virtually twice the minimum height. I'm assuming you've done a business plan to work out the numbers and ensure that your rents and your cost of build and all of that. Could I just ask you why you can't see your way forward with being less than twice the minimum allowed height? Are you saying that it doesn't make financials? I mean, what's the reason behind going to the maximum height when, as you can probably imagine, you're in many people's backyards? And I'm sure that's going to be a concern tonight. And I don't know when you embarked on this journey in Port Colborne that to go sort of skyrocketing to R4? What was behind all that? And is that something that for you is set in stone because of the cost calculations?
Sorry, may I answer? So through the chair, so provincial, regional, as well as city policy encourage a range of housing types. This application fulfills that. So this application does fulfill that. So when you are considering higher density types of development, such as that which is proposed with this application, what's appropriate to look at is compatibility with adjacent uses. In this case, these lands are adjacent to highway commercial uses on two sides and residential uses on one side. The proposed apartment building would be set back, mixed use building, because that's ground floor commercial, would be set back 16 meters from the adjacent residential uses. So that would serve to mitigate those land use compatibility issues, while at the same time meeting Port Colborne's direction of providing for a mix and range of housing types.
Councillor? Yep, go ahead.
Just wondering, like in the mitigation, the setback changes and everything, are you, being a regional road / provincial highway, have you moved to the absolute minimum or tightest you can get to the highway? Or, because I'm sure MTO is involved in this, and I don't know if you've been able to move it as much to the highway, again, mitigating neighborhoods. So I don't know if you have an answer for that.
Through the chair, the proposed building would be approximately 4 meters setback from the regional road. Right. MTO is not a commenting agency on this application. 4 meters is a pretty, when you're considering a building of the height that's proposed, you don't really want to be right at a 0 meter setback, because then you're going to overpower the street. So it's generally good practice to be a little bit setback, so you're not overpowering the street. This would maintain a pedestrian interface with the regional road.
Great, thank you. Further questions? Councillor Bagu?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to, I guess it doesn't matter who answers the question anyways. We talk about affordability for people in here. I have it written down here, the right exact words. Or affordable housing. Are any of these units going to be under the definition of affordable housing or market value?
Go ahead.
Through the chair, the proposed dwelling would be market value. We're not proposing affordable housing as per the definitions. However, providing for a range of housing types caters to several demographics. So if you are proposing exclusively single detached dwellings, you're generally less affordable than if you're proposing apartment type dwelling units. And when you're proposing higher density, it can drop the price point a bit more because of economies of scale.
Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, this guy's been around. He's put the answer. My next question, visitor parking spots. We're talking about parking, and as you know, a lot of senior citizens live in this municipality. PSWs come and visit in apartment buildings to take care of their clients in that. And your parking spots, are any of them designated visitor parking for, like, example, PSWs or any other to that effect?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, at this stage, none are specifically designated as visitor. There are 17 parking spaces that are dedicated to the commercial uses. It's anticipated that these commercial uses won't be used all the time, when can be operated as visitor uses temporarily. Further, parking study was conducted, which I researched similar building forms in municipalities in Welland and I believe Niagara Falls, which supported the 132 parking spaces on site for residential and commercial uses.
Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One more question. In your very good report you presented in here. You talk about how close things are, shopping, high schools and stuff, but there's nothing in there. Like, I'm just thinking if a kid wants to go to high school, how he's going to get there, because you got to go around everything. And as far as I know, actually I confirmed it before I came here, the sidewalk ends at First Avenue. And even for somebody to walk, say they want to walk down the street to the grocery store or to the other little stores there is no available sidewalk. I know it's 60 kilometers an hour, but I don't think anybody goes 60 down that road, as far as I know, Mr. Mayor. So I guess it goes to planning, because it would be for the developer. Is there a benefit of putting a sidewalk from this development to First Avenue?
Mr. Room?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Excuse me. In short, I'm not sure. I feel like there's a lot that you would need to consider to implement that. I'm just thinking about logistics of, is that something that we would have to assume? Is that something that the developer would have to help pay for? And is it necessarily something that we want on that busy highway? I'm sure after the previous council meeting, we had a lot of complaints about the sidewalk along West Side Road. And how busy it gets out there. I don't know if that's something necessarily that we want to recreate on Main Street West. And then you'd have to consider as well that it is a regional road, so they probably have some say in it as well.
And it might be the region that actually builds the sidewalk. So it would probably be the region that builds the sidewalk, no different than it did on,
I hope so, Mr. Mayor.
on Main Street in Humberston. So
May I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Mayor. A 7.29 meter road widening was required by the region for this development. So the subject lands do front on to the regional strategic cycling network. So you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's anticipated that that road widening will be used for some sort of active transportation infrastructure, but up to the discretion of the region.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. One more question, I guess, to Mr. Room. I noticed when I drove by, just confirmed tonight before I came here, the storm sewers, just open ditches. Yeah, I'm sick and tired of looking at open ditches in the city. And as part of the development, to close these open ditches, start closing these open ditches within our municipality, or just leave them, the way they are.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bagu. Yeah, it would probably need to be something that is addressed during the site plan phase. If there are drainage concerns, we may have to look at the possibility of maybe upgrading that drainage system.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm good.
great, thank you. Further questions? Yep, Councillor Bruno?
Thank you, Worship. To the presenter, can you clarify this parking issue again? We talked about 132 versus the 136 required. We talk about 95 units that are apartments, but 132 parking spaces. Can you break down, one of you's mentioned about the commercial spots. I'm trying to get my head around how many are dedicated to the residential, how many to the commercial?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So 17 spaces are dedicated to commercial. And out of the 132 proposed, that would leave, mental math's failing me, 125? No, 120?
Okay.
For residential uses. I apologize, I don't have the exact.
That's fine.
Oh,
No, that clarifies it more than I thought. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Further questions? Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, you can go back. So before I go to the gallery, anything to add, Chris?
Yes, sorry, I'm seeing.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Where am I in my notes here? Okay, before opening the meeting to the public, I would like to read the following. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make a written submissions to the City of Port Colborne before a decision on the proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendments are passed by council, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the City of Port Colborne to the Ontario Land Tribunal. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the City of Port Colborne before a decision on the proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendments are passed by council, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Land Tribunal unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there is reasonable grounds to do so. To any interested members of the public, if you would like to receive future notices regarding this application, please contact myself at by email at chris.room@portcolborne.ca or by telephone at 905-835-2900. My extension is 205, or the city clerk at sima.tufale@portcolborne.ca. To any interested members of the public in attendance in council chambers tonight, there is also a sign-in sheet at the back where you can sign your name to receive future notices regarding this application. At this time, I'd like to invite any members of the public in attendance or registered online who wish to speak to the applications to do so.
Great, thank you. Councillor?
Thank you. There's been some changes in the Planning Act, and through you maybe to Denise. I'm not sure if this applies, but applications have come back a lot quicker of late, and there has been some change in the legislation. Would this be part of that? So I'm just wondering if you could explain how many days to the public that this is likely to come back by, because it's determined on when the application was filed, not from tonight. I'm wondering if you could speak to that.
Through the mayor to the councillor, I will defer to Chris on the exact days, but we do have 120 days for council to make a decision on the application from the date that the application was deemed complete, which I would assume would probably be about a month ago. Given that our reports are now going to be indicating when we anticipate coming back with a recommendation report. This particular report may indicate that as well. So I would anticipate in a month or two, staff bringing a recommendation report forward.
Great, thank you.
And on both applications.
Okay, great, thanks.
Great, thank you, Councillor. I have one person that called in to be a delegate, is Mr. Robert Hames. Is he here? Oh. Again, just state your full name and address, please.
Hi, I'm Robert James. I live at 23 3rd Avenue in Port Colborne. There's my house there backing onto the proposed site. I have many concerns about this application. I'd like to know what the difference is in the size of what is there now compared to what is going to be built as far as footprint, how much of the building lot is going to be taking up. Has the MTO approved of this? There's going to be much more vehicle traffic going on in and out of the highway. They're going to have to do a redesign of the road to accommodate the extra traffic. There's going to be 95 places in there, and not all places have just one vehicle. A lot of people these days have 2 vehicles per family. You've got a husband and wife that are driving or taking the kids to school or whatever. They don't have, I don't think they have enough parking for one thing. And there's going to be children in the apartments, so there's going to be school buses plugging up the highway, as well as eventually transit's going to have to go there too. That highway is not wide enough for everything to be stopped completely like that. When you drive down highway or Colborne Street going out to Highway 3, you try to pull out, it's very busy right now. You put all this extra traffic in there, it's going to be very dangerous and almost impossible to get out. Excuse me, I'm just nervous.
No, go ahead. You're doing fine.
The commercial units on the ground floor, how many of them are there going to be total, and what type are they going to be? And he said there's going to be 17 parking spots for that. Is that including the employees, people coming in and out of the restaurant? And if there's 17 places is not enough if you've got 4 or 5 businesses with a couple of employees plus your customers. There's going to be a lot of children in the residential units. Where are they going to play? They've got no green space there for the kids to play in. The only green space they have is maybe 3 meters around the swale. There's going to be no place for these children to play, and they're right on a major highway. And they're too far to walk, to go to a park, because like we were usually just saying, there's no sidewalks anywhere along there from the go, so they're gonna be running up and down the highway trying to get to parks. I talked to one gentleman, he told me that sometimes they'll put it on the roof. Well, I don't agree with that, because if you've got a child playing on the roof with a ball or something, you know what's gonna happen. You're gonna have them all over the place on the ground. It's my understanding that new development cannot affect present landowners. I have pictures with me tonight that prove otherwise. My pictures show my backyard in the spring since Safe and Sound developed their present building. I contacted a counselor about the problem, was told to berm up my backyard so the water doesn't come on. I said I wouldn't do that because then I would just flood out my neighbors. So I've just put up with it, which is not good either. Yeah, I was told that it's a civil matter now, that I should go and talk to the owner of Safe and Sound and see if they would do something about it. My concern with that is now with them, no green space in the new apartment complex, where's that water going to go? It's going to go right up to my house again. Right now, it's only taken up about 40 feet of my back property. That's a third of the way to my house. You close off all this and don't have enough drainage, it's going to be right up to my house now. Many times a day you can drive down the highway and see people walking the malls back and forth. And again, we're talking about adults, children walking up and down with no sidewalks. The positioning of the building is, to me, is too close to the highway, because the highway is going to have to be widened. There's no doubt about it. That highway is not going to be able to handle the amount of traffic that's going in and out. And how are they going to dig the below grade foundations? If they're going to jackhammer, that's going to shake everybody's houses. And the longer they have to jackhammer to get that rock out of there, because everybody knows everything's on rock. I can feel it when they blast over at the quarry, it shakes my house. So we're all on that same rock. So that's really going to make a mess of our houses. And the longer they take, the more damage it's going to cause to our houses in the neighborhood. You're requiring 136 parking spots, 95 residential units. Like I say, the charging stations, they're having 8 charging stations for vehicles. That's not nearly enough. Everybody's going to these EV cars. Everybody's going, 8 spots will be taken up in no time. That to me is terrible to have that. And then to make the parking spots narrower than what they should be is bad, because you get a truck or a van or something like that, that takes up the whole spot pretty much as it is now. I think that should be left the way it is. And I don't know what the reasoning is behind the landscape buffer being reduced from 4 meters to 3. Just leave it at 4 and go with the bylaws. The 6-meter ingress and egress is very narrow. If you have trucks and cars going in at the same time, that's pretty tight. Plus, when you come from West Side Road, past McDonald's, and come that way, you can't even get into the motel. You look at their ingress, you can't get in there. So what's going to happen is they're going to come down First Street to 3rd, race down there to Colally, and then Colally out to Main and come in that way. That's the only way for them to get in there. That's not only the cars, but that's your loading vehicles and everything. They come down from Highway 3, say from Fort Erie or from Welland on the West Side Road. There's no way to get into that. You can't, there's no, you can get out both ways, but you can only come in from Wainfleet. And we got a lot of kids in the neighborhood. It's a quiet neighborhood. The kids are playing around and everything. Everybody drives slow. This is going to be a nightmare to our subdivision. With all this traffic running in and out of there, it's terrible. And the way the world is going green right now, everybody's trying to condense the footprint and green spaces and everything with parks and everything. This place is going to be built and you're going to have no greenery. It's going to be a little bit around the edges. That's all I see in the master plan here. That's not good. That goes back to, again, to where the kids are going to play. You can't have kids playing in a swale. That's just not right. Now I see also on their legend it shows a snow storage. I can't find that anywhere on there. And that's my concern, because when that snow melts, that's what's coming up to my house. There are 10 amendments that they want. I don't know why they have to come in and try and get 10 amendments. This is just the start of the process. Like, who knows by the time they're done, is it going to be 50? Like, I don't understand why they want to come into the city and change the bylaws. While they're digging the rock out and they're hammering, jackhammering, who knows, it could be months of them doing it. Are they going to put a sound barrier up so we don't have to listen to that hammer steady? I'm sure they're going to have more than one of them there. You're going to listen to this steady all day long. That's terrible for a subdivision.
Just one more minute to wrap up.
I think this application is dangerous in so many ways. I think it needs to be relooked at, redesigned. Things need to change. This is just unacceptable in so many different ways. So dangerous in so many different ways for the children, for everybody concerned. Thank you for your time. I do have pictures of my flooded backyard if you like them, if you'd like to see them.
You can hand that in to Mr. Room if you'd like.
Okay.
He'll take them.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. James. Any questions to the speaker?
Something the speaker said reminded me of something I should have asked a consultant. Do you want more wit?
Yeah, this is questions to the speaker.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. Questions to the speaker? Great. Thank you, Mr. Haynes.
Okay, would you like a copy of the whole thing, the speech?
That goes to Mr. Room. Yes, thank you. Okay, so going to the gallery, any further speakers on this?
Yeah, I'll say something.
Yep, come on up. And just press the red button, Martin, state your name and address, please.
My name is Martin Miskalk and I live at 9 3rd Avenue. I won't go over everything that everybody has said. A subject that I thought about was the sidewalks. Okay, definitely concerned. Where are these kids going to go? Where are the people going to go? How are they going to get to where they need to go, for sure. Sewers, flooding has always been an issue on 3rd Avenue. But another concern is about water. We have very low water pressure. We're like at the end of the line. So I think this is something else that would have to be addressed, because if you put in 95 more units in there, you know, you're almost doubling the area. I think water is going to be a big concern as well. So just something else to look at. That's really all I have to say. Okay?
Good. And just to that, Public Works will make comments on both water, sewer, and stormwater, correct?
Right.
So
yeah.
that'll come back to Chris's report with regards to what Public Works talks about pertaining to the three issues of infrastructure that they look at.
For sure.
Good.
Okay.
Okay. Any questions to the speaker? Great. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Further speakers? Okay. Councillor Bruni, you had a question?
Thank you. Just two that came to mind. Three, and perhaps this is to the developer owner. Of the 95 units, do you have a mix of those as to 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom?
Planner, do you want to come forward? Okay. Good. Thanks. Well, he's the planner. He's the planner.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I do have those statistics. They're on this map, which is extremely tiny, but I will try and get them for you.
Thank you.
For 1 bedroom plus den, it's 44, and 2 bedroom is 21. 2 bedroom plus den is 15. 1 bedroom BF, I apologize, I don't know what that stands for, is 10, and then 2 bedroom, pardon?
Barrier-free is BF.
Barrier-free, perfect, thank
Yeah,
you.
no problem.
Is 10, and then 2-bedroom barrier-free is 5, for a total of 95 units.
Sorry, again, 44,
44 one-bedroom plus den.
okay,
21 2-bedroom.
okay. That's the main
good.
thing I was concerned about. Just this stems back to parking. We've had a couple.
Speaker, your speaker.
We've had a couple developments that have come through. Parking's been an issue. Here, there isn't even a chance of street parking. It's on the regional road or Main Street. So parking would be a concern, I know, of mine and many. The other question I had, your colleague mentioned with this height, and I don't know a lot about this topic, so maybe Chris and you and your colleague could explain this. So I understand shadowing, and I understand they do shadowing studies to see if that affects people in nearby. What I don't understand is how you made out with the shadowing study. So in other words, that's 6 stories. You're modeling. What can you tell us about how that affects the nearest residential homes?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and my colleague Jesse can jump in if needed. A shadow study was actually not required as part of a complete application. Although the shadow study was not required, it was considered regarding the design of the building to try and push it back as far as possible, and considering the setbacks from the residential dwellings to the rear property line, just to do whatever we can to push that building closest to the northeast corner. So, and then whatever shadowing would be as distant as possible from the neighboring dwellings.
Counselor?
Through you to our planner, Chris. So is the planning staff the decider of whether they should do a shadowing study or not? And if it is, and there's not one required, on what basis was that decision made?
Jerome?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Bruno. So that it would have been discussed at pre-con, so it would have been identified by planning staff at the time if a shadow study or a shadow analysis would have been required. I remember going back and forth a little bit on the location of this structure, and we came to the decision that pushed closer to the front of the road alleviated our concerns for shadows. Whereas I think we had a bit of discussion about if the building was to be located closer to the residential property lines. There were a lot more concerns that were raised, not just regarding shadows, but just land use compatibility in general. And we established that closer to the front alleviated some of the concerns with shadows, like the representatives explained, as well as some of the land use issues as well.
Counselor?
So shadowing is obviously just from the word sunlight blockage, that kind of thing. But how does it speak to that, visibility into backyard? So, if you're 5 stories, right, that line goes down of what people perceive they can be seen from the apartment building. I guess I'm having trouble on an infill where shadowing and that isn't considered, or the study to go ahead. Is that something, because we only have one chance to get that right. And if that makes me want to say you need to be 5 floors or 4 floors or a re-articulation, what I want is facts to base that decision on. Not speculation, not we think it'll be okay, all those kind of things. Can we ask for a shadowing study still?
Denise?
Through the mayor to the councillor, typically a 6-story development located on a main thoroughfare like that, we would not require a shadow study. Given the proposed height of 20 meters, any shadowing of that would be very minimal. And considering the location of it, not directly within a residential neighborhood. That being said, if the applicant is willing to do some shadowing models, that typically is something easier to do if they have the software to do it versus a full study to understand the different hours. So you've got the modeling piece versus an entire study, but it's something we can have a conversation with them about and see if they are willing to do it.
Right. I guess I get the fact that, whilst on 2 sides or 3, it might not be an issue. That really doesn't matter if you're in the shadowing and you're a resident and you live there all your life and it's your house and it's your backyard. So I would like to see if you and your client could consider some of that modeling, because I think at the end of the day, you know, I always come back to the fact that when you're building huge subdivisions, things are actually many times less an issue than when you're building in someone's backyard and infill. And whilst it isn't the scale of that, it has more effect on existing neighborhoods and the existing citizens. I'm sure you want to do the right thing by the citizens, so I would ask that you consider that.
We'll have to bring it back and discuss.
Yes, through the chair, yes, we'll have to discuss internally. We're taking comments and we're open to hearing what members of council have to say.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor. Okay, thanks. So I'll put the recommendation on the floor that Planning and Development Report 2023-198 be received as information. If I can have Councillors Bruno and Aquilina to move that. Are there any comments or questions to the motion? Seeing none, all in favor? And that's carried. Okay, so we do have one more item, 5.1, so if you were here for 4.2, you don't need to stick around for that one, just so you know. Thank you. Thank you for attending. One. Okay, Council, we have item 5.1.
Public Works is doing it.
Councillor?
Yeah, and only would be out front of the property, right?
Councillor?
Sorry.
5.1 is laneway stop up and close between Jefferson Avenue and Homewood Avenue. Madam Planner.
Just bear with me, so I'll pull it up again. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Council.
This is a public meeting to consider the stopping up and closing of the laneway between Jefferson Avenue and Homewood Avenue. Staff did receive one correspondence from an individual, I think, who was intending on speaking, but I'm pretty sure his concerns have been addressed. This is the next step in the process. The property has been dedicated surplus. The next piece is to stop up and close, and then after that, council can consider the sale of the property. So that would be the next step after the bylaw would be passed.
Questions, Councillor Bruno?
I've just been trying to, went by there today. There isn't anything that, unless I missed it, what is the dimension, the width of this laneway?
It's very tight.
Yeah.
It was originally a hydro easement, but I don't think
You know,
there's
when
any-
you look at this, you don't have a concept of whether that's 22 feet or 66 feet.
But I looked at, there's a vehicle that's parked there, and it's not even the length of.
Yeah.
Oh, I
It's-
see it
It's
there.
very tight.
Yeah. Okay, I got
If
you
you look
now.
across the street from Jefferson all the way to Rosemount, that's where the hydro lines go, and they feed the
It's
South
a
Crescent. That's-
bugaboo of mine, even when we get dev reports, that we're not putting these dimensions often on things. The more we could do that, the better.
I'm pretty sure it's 16.
Okay, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Thank you.
When this was originally discussed, that was just talked about where there's one lady where her driveway is on part of it, and the two neighbors want to buy a chunk each, and because it was, so it's not saleable for building lots, but the people that live next to it would get first right of refusal to purchase those.
Yeah.
As they abut their properties.
Yeah, so-
Go ahead, Councillor.
Because I've talked to a gentleman whose girlfriend owns the house.
Your microphone.
Sorry. Whose girlfriend owns the house on
Homewood?
Homewood. There are a few fences in the back, so how many encroach on this piece of property? Because the store has like the big fence that seems to encapsulate this laneway. That's kind of a new looking fence, so did they?
Before.
So is the.
Sugarloaf Esso, the
Yes.
house at the corner of Homewood and Sugarloaf, the one in on Homewood.
Yep.
And then the one in on Jefferson.
Yes, so the store has a fence that they built because they're actually building a home beside the gas station or whatever it's gonna be, because there's an excavation going on. But if you take a look from Jefferson, they put a massive fence up around their whole property, and is that fence on our piece of property?
Through the mayor to the councillor, looking at the aerial photography, I do see a number of components from the various homes and businesses that are on the city right away, so that would have to be dealt with. If we're proposing to sell a portion, for instance, to one of the homes or businesses, then they conceivably could leave that component, those fence, et cetera. If not, they would have to remove it. So we'd have those discussions. My colleagues in economic development would be discussing with the owners to deal with those pieces.
Yeah, and I guess the mayor kind of answered in front of my question is, are we going to approach the landowners to see if they want, or are we just gonna kind of divide it up? Because like, if one person buys the whole easement, what does that do to the landowners that abut it? If there's an issue with a driveway, or anything like that, there's not much, I will say there's not much value in the land, but there could be value in losing part of your driveway, if somebody just comes in and says, you know what, offers us more so that your neighbor can't have it. So I would like to be as fair as possible so everybody gets a chance.
Yeah, I think the normal standard, Councillor, would be that all four property owners would get to purchase their quarter of it.
Okay.
In essence.
Yeah.
I mean, the Sugarloaf Esso has the biggest length, but in essence, if.
Yeah,
it's
because
quarters.
when I.
But if the guy beside, let's say, on Jefferson just says, oh, I don't want it, well then, and the
It
Esso
may
station
benefit
wants
the
to,
store, yeah.
they have all that right. Once the guy says, I don't want it.
Yeah.
But if all four say they want it, then they come up with a price with staff and it comes back to us
Okay.
here.
As long as everybody has an opportunity to.
And they
buy a
should,
portion of it.
yeah, and they should.
Okay.
And this all came to being with the lady on Homewood. With regards to Howard driveway, that's what we're told originally.
First house in, not.
Yeah,
right on.
yeah, not at the corner of the first house. Counselor?
To a similar vein as Councillor Elliott, you'll remember when the now apartment that's come forward on the old rail spur next to the former Bataway Marine came up, they only wanted to buy so much of the 66 feet, and we'd be left with the balance where the hydro. We pushed back and said, if you want it, you've got to take it all. My concern is some landlocked liability that still remains from the city. So I'm just suggesting that, you know, you must, like, if you have 40 feet of rear yard mirrored on that, I don't think you should be able to buy 20 feet. So A, you gotta buy your mirror. B, if the person on the other side doesn't buy 8 feet, I don't know how persuasive we can be to say, if you're gonna buy any of this, it's 8 or 16. But so that, because you don't want to be left now with an 8-foot piece that's useless that we're supposed to cut or are liable for. So I think you gotta try and get this all sold that way. So your guy behind you didn't want the 8 feet, we're giving you 16 for, I don't know, the same price or $1 more or something, just to clear it.
Yeah, because the two houses on Homewood, it's side yard. The one house on Jefferson, it's side yard. Sugarloaf Esso, it's rear yard. But you're correct, yeah.
The guy who wants the 8 will take the 16 if that's the only way he gets 8.
That's
if there's
right.
no more money. Yeah.
Yeah, so, okay. Further questions? So recommendation that Chief Administrative Office Report 2023-199 be received, that the Economic Development and Tourism Services Division be directed to bring a stop up and close bylaw for the property shown on Appendix A to the October 24th, 2023 meeting, or council meeting for city consideration. If I could have Councilors Elliott and Hoyle move that. Again, further questions? Certainly.
Who is selling this? Bram? Gary? Do we know?
Through the mayor to the councilor, it's through the Economic Development Office. That's
Great,
receiving
okay,
about that.
that's good. Just want to know who to
Call?
call.
No problem.
I'm filling in.
Swoop in and take it out from
Yeah.
under.
Okay, all in favor? That's carried. Okay, at this time, we are adjourned. We thank everybody for coming this evening.
When they're not
We're going to adjourn, and I thank those in attendance tonight, those that spoke, and those that joined us virtually. Thank you. Have a good evening.